Saudi Arabia is condemning the Iranian strikes on the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and Jordan as a breach of sovereignty. Abdulaziz Al Gashian is a senior non-resident fellow at the Gulf International Forum, and he joins us now live from the Saudi capital of Riyadh. Thank you very much for being here with us for this breaking news. Can we start with, please, how is this being received in Saudi Arabia, and what are people there saying today?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I mean, needless to say, things aren't really hunky-dory. It is exactly what the Saudi diplomacy and GCC diplomacy has been trying to avoid for years. Nightmare scenario after nightmare scenario has been manifesting before our very eyes. And this is why, unfortunately, the diplomacy has been invested in so much to avoid this. And unfortunately, we have reached this limit. Right now, I think the strikes on Iran, which led to the strikes on these Gulf capitals and these Gulf states, just simply making sure that, or reminding us that of how insecure we are really in the region. And therefore, I think that the condemnation that Saudi Arabia has issued speaks to the fact that I think it has done everything it can, just like what the Qatari statement suggested, that it does everything it can to try to avoid being targeted. It did not facilitate any American, needless to say Israeli, strikes on Iran, yet Iran still decided to strike some of these states and trespass the sovereignty. So we're right now in an era really of a nightmare scenario that's just taking place time and again. And I think what we're going to see now is a new era of just insecurity. The reason why, Riley, the reason why we have invested a great deal of this diplomacy is because we in the GCC and Saudi Arabia are on the front line of two other people's wars, and now three people's wars. It's the United States, Israel, and Iran. We are on the front line here. And then as a result, the landscape is something that we're going to suffer from. So this is why there's going to be a lot of frustration and a lot of diplomacy going to be at play. And we're just going to have to wait and see. There's just many variables that are not in our hands or not in the hands of the GCC. So I anticipate the Saudi ruling elite, as well as the Gulf states and their ruling elites, are not going to throw more fuel into the fire. I think they are the most level-headed out of all these actors. So we are just going to wait and see. I think American officials have suggested that this may be a few days long.
I'm very sorry to interrupt you. We have another guest that we have to get to in short order. Hamid Ghanbari is the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iran, and he joins us now live from Dubai. Thank you for being with us on Al Jazeera. Iran has strongly condemned the recent U.S.-Israeli airstrikes. What is Iran's official assessment of these attacks?
Hello, and thank you for having me. Iran strongly condemns these airstrikes. From our perspective, they constitute a clear violation of the UN Charter, especially the principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and prohibition of use of force. Military attacks on Iranian territory undermines international law and threaten regional peace and stability. Iran has always emphasized that disputes should be resolved through diplomacy, not through force.
So these strikes occurred while diplomatic contacts between Iran and the United States were ongoing. How does Iran interpret this timing?
The timing is deeply troubling. Iran entered diplomatic contacts in good faith because we believe that dialogue and diplomacy are the most responsible ways to reduce tensions and avoid conflicts. When military attacks take place during diplomatic engagement, it damages trust and raises serious doubts about the commitment to peaceful solutions.
So Iran has now responded to the missile strikes on Israeli targets and U.S. military facilities in the region. What is the legal basis you have for this response?
Iran's response is based on the inherent rights of self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. When a state faces an armed attack, it has a right to defend itself and its people and territory. At the same time, we deeply regret that human suffering caused by this escalation. One of the most painful tragedies occurred in the city of Mina, where an elementary girls' school was struck during the attacks. According to the latest reports, around 40 people have been killed, many of them young school children and school staff. This is not only a military issue, this is a humanitarian tragedy. Children, schools, and civilians must never become victims of war. The loss of those young lives is heartbreaking and reminds the world that the human cost of conflict is always the heaviest for the most innocent.
Some of these strikes targeted U.S. bases in Gulf countries. How does Iran address concerns from the regional states about this?
Iran respects the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all regional countries, especially our neighbors in Persian Gulf. Our actions were not directed at those states or their people. They targeted specific foreign military facilities that were used in operations against Iran. Iran remains committed to regional dialogue, mutual respect, and cooperation with neighboring countries.
At this point, is Iran expecting that the United Nations or the international community will play any role at this stage of the crisis?
Definitely, Iran expects the United Nations and the international community to uphold international law and to protect civilians. The tragedy in Mina, where children lost their lives in a school, shows why the world must take humanitarian law seriously. Schools, students, and civilians must be protected at all times. The United Nations Security Council has a responsibility to address this situation, to prevent further escalation, and to ensure accountability for attacks that harm civilians.
Do you see, looking forward, any possibility for de-escalation or a route to de-escalation in the near future?
Actually, Iran does not seek escalation. Our priority remains peace, stability, and diplomacy. But the escalation requires the attacks to stop and that Iran's sovereignty and rights are respected. The world must remember that behind political tensions, there are human lives, including children, whose futures should never be destroyed by war. If aggression stops and respect for international law returns, there would be hope for, coming back to de-escalation and to respecting the territorial integrity of countries and coming back to the international relation based on the rule of law.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for joining us here on Al Jazeera. Hamid Ghanbari is the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iran.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.